Welcome to episode number 225, Love Me. I'm your host, Damon Soka. I hope today that you will forgive me for expanding a New Testament story beyond its original text, and I hope that you will also find inspiration in its message. He had been fishing all night, and he had caught nothing. He was an experienced fisherman, and he knew this place well. It was his favorite spot. He knew that if he couldn't catch something somewhere, he could always catch at least a few here, and he had casted and casted, but nothing. His catch was as discouraging as was his life. He had tried to sleep at first when he had first found that the night would not be a fruitful one, but it was of no use. The last few years had kept running through his mind again and again, the last few days more especially. The casting at least kept him occupied. It had always helped him think. But each cast this night seemed to echo with deep emotion. It was just a few days since the Savior had been murdered and then resurrected. He had been a witness to everything, and parts of it had been wonderful. But his mind could not forget that night when his Master had washed his feet, and then, in a moment of weakness, he had said those awful words, "I know not the man." Those words echoed in his ears, drowning out any comfort. Why had he done it? Why had he said that he didn't know him? Why had he acted so quickly? Yes, his intent was just to be where the Savior was, to see the proceedings, to know what would happen to him. He did it without thinking in what he had been called to do. He did it so quickly, so easily, even when the Savior had warned him. He was certainly a witness, but the Lord couldn't possibly use him now. He was too weak, too quick to act, too slow to think. After those wonderful events and the resurrection, he had only seen the Savior a couple of times, and they had not spoken of it. Maybe he would choose another. After all, John and James had certainly not denied him that night. That made his heart feel a little better, but overall, it just didn't seem to help. He was lost, out on a lake doing the only thing he ever knew how to do. He desperately wanted to talk to the Savior. He wanted to ask him. He wanted to be with him, just to see if his friend would at least forgive him. But his prayers had been futile. No answers. He'd only felt lost. Finally, that morning light came. Those first rays of light that obscure the stars. He would have to face his wife and family and tell them he had caught nothing. But that wasn't really what was on his mind. Life was not on his side, it seemed. He wondered if his relationship with the Savior or any one of the apostles would ever be the same again. As they approached the shore, a fire was burning. Nothing unusual for this time of year. The weather was still a little bit cool. As they neared, a voice rang out, "Have you any meat?" Peter wasn't listening. His mind caught up in caring for the nets. "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and ye will find." This brought Peter to his feet. "We've been casting all night. There is no way fish are this close to shore. They never have been." He just about said something rash, but a feeling stopped him. He had not fully put one of the nets away. Without thinking, he gathered the net. He threw it off the right side of the boat. "We'll see if this guy knows what he's talking about. When he comes in empty, I'll just show him." Then the line tugged. Then it jerked. Suddenly Peter was on his back, trying to haul in a load of fish, one that was rare for this time of year. He called for the other boats and started to empty the nets into the boat, almost incredulous at the catch. And then there was John, standing still watching the man on the shore. Peter looked up at him as if to say, "Why aren't you helping?" But John stood silent. "What, John? What is it? What's going on?" John didn't move, didn't turn to Peter. He just said, "It is the Lord." It was then he recognized the voice. Peter let go the line and the net. He stood, and with one swift movement, he tossed himself into the ocean and swam to the Lord. The sopping wet Peter reached the Savior and knelt at his feet. Peter didn't know what to say. So many things flooded to his mind and his heart. The one question he wanted to ask, he couldn't. The Savior gently lifted him to his feet and embraced him. The warmth flowed through him as if he had never felt it before. It was peace, it was joy, it was light. He wanted so badly to ask his questions, but the light, the feeling overcame him. Before he had recovered, his fellow apostles stood with him. They were conversing, hugging, and laughing about the catch they didn't get in their terrible night. And with that moment, the opportunity was gone. They walked towards the fire to warm themselves, and there was fish and honeycomb prepared for each of them. Peter lingered a little behind, somewhat content, hearing the Lord talk with his fellow friends again. The Savior invited them to sit, and with prayer the meal began. The catch of the night was the obvious topic. No doubt they compared it to 3 years earlier when the Savior had done almost the exact same thing. It was as though he was with them again, just like when they labored together. Peter didn't interact much and took his share of elbows and ribbing about his never-fail fishing spot. The conversation eventually lagged, and Peter, sitting near the Savior, felt him turn towards him and gently ask, "Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these?" Peter could see him pointing towards a pile of fish they had caught. This hurt. The Savior really knew how to get to the point. The Savior knew that Peter loved him. Here he was, fishing again. He didn't feel worthy, although he knew what he needed to do. The Savior had made that perfectly clear before his death. He knew that the Savior wanted him to lead the church. But that was before he had denied him. How could he lead the church now? How could a man serve at the head of the church when he had denied its head during the atoning sacrifice? He didn't feel worthy. He didn't feel that he could. But he could not deny that he loved the Lord more than fishing. "Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee," came from his mouth, but it rang hollow. It rang like the Pharisee the night the Savior was condemned. He loved the Lord, but did not know if the Lord could ever love him. Then came those words like a bolt of lightning with a deafening thunder. "Feed my lambs." Had he heard him right? Feed my lambs? What did this mean? Did it mean that he was still to lead the church? How could that be? Why would he still be called? Why would the Lord still love him? Why continued to ring in his head? Then came that gentle voice again. "Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me?" The same question, but different. He had not pointed at the fish. Why would he ask it again? What did he want? What was his purpose? He knew what I had done. He knows that I don't feel worthy. I don't feel capable. He knows my weakness. Why would he ask me? The second question hung in the air. "Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I do love thee." This time it rang out more true. He had expressed his love, although he was still unsure if the Savior wanted him. "Feed my sheep." There it was again. What was he trying to say? What was he trying to communicate? Could he still want me to be part of his leadership? Could he forgive my weakness and my denial? Peter was now fully engulfed in his thoughts. Then those words rang out one more time. "Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me?" This time the words penetrated deep within him. He did love the Lord with all his heart. He did love the gospel that he taught. He was willing to do whatever the Lord asked. He could feel the forgiveness and the peace. Then those words rang deep within him. He was still called. He was still chosen to lead, despite his inadequacies and his weak moments and his denials. With tears in his eyes and a full heart, he said to the Lord, "Lord, thou knowest all things, and thou knowest that I do love thee." This time the words rang sweet to his mind and heart. "Feed my sheep." He knew now. He knew what he was to do. He had purpose and forgiveness. He was called and would be called to lead and, of course, to follow. The pains of nights past was gone. He had been freed from his torment with 3 simple words: "Feed my sheep." I love this story about Peter. Did it really happen this way? Who knows? But we do know that Peter was wrestling with his past and his future. He wondered if the Lord still loved him and wanted him to lead the church. That moment changed actually millions of lives, and not just during Peter's ministry, but for the ages. However, what I love the most about this moment is the intimacy with the Savior, with which the Savior approached Peter and allowed him to discover for himself just how much he truly loved him. One of the more difficult objectives to accomplish in this life, especially with mental illness, is to understand our relationship with the Savior. How many of us would give anything to sit beside the Savior and hear him even speak the same words given to Peter, "Lovest thou me?" Just like Peter, I am most certain we would search deeply in our hearts and minds, wondering how much we are willing to suffer for him. We wonder if he could ever really use us in any capacity with our weaknesses, with our mental and emotional minds. We wonder if we could ever be worthy to serve. We wonder at times if he even cares or loves us. Just like that night of darkness for Peter, we often find ourselves wrestling with difficult questions because we simply suffer with mental and emotional illness. And just like Peter, we have doubted the Lord in difficult moments. We have at times lost our way and our path, and yet it seems that the Savior is ever willing to come to our shore, a place of comfort for us, a place where we feel at home. He is willing to feed us, sit with us a while, and when our mind and heart is ready, he will ask us those questions that will change our lives for eternity. We just at times need to get through the fruitless night and difficult empty nets. Many of you have probably questioned your relationship with the Savior and his relationship with you. And I know this because it has been a reoccurring theme in my own life and with my own mental and emotional illness. I can tell you that your relationship is far more embedded and far deeper than you even know. The Savior has been building an abiding love within you for many years through your illness. And yes, while the illness robs you of those feelings, that doesn't diminish the relationship. In fact, with time and effort, the relationship deepens and widens. When we suffer, he does not leave our side, even though it may feel that way. It makes no sense to give such a difficult trial as mental and emotional illness and not provide the guidance, love, and concern necessary to get us to the other side of it safely. And so, as he did with Peter, he walks beside you when you can't feel him. He listens and answers your prayers when the voices are too loud to hear him. He knows how you feel and the pain and suffering you are experiencing. He knows you, and you know him. And I know that you love him deeply and that he loves you deeply. I promise that he can and will show you that love. Sometimes we simply need to ask it of him. And like that moment for Peter on the shores of a lake, he will come to you and you will know him. May the Lord bless you this week. May he bless you to understand his love for you. Until next week, please do your part so that the Lord can do his.